neighbors. Welcome to another episode of Tipsy Neighbors. We are 5 friends with varied opinions and backgrounds. We openly and honestly discuss the subject of the day. No topic is off limits. In fact, if you'd like us to chat about something that's been on your mind, find us on the web at tipsyneighbors.com, on Instagram at The Tipsy Neighbors, or on X, formerly Twitter, at Tipsy Neighbors. Now let's get this episode started. You just like to hear me count?
Count it down again.
I always stop at 3 because I don't know what comes after that.
Oh, welcome to Tipsy Neighbors. Last episode 8, the
gender roles episode. I don't remember. I think it was 8.
Yeah, the episode number 8 about gender roles and parenting. We actually had one of our listeners reach out to us, and as you kind of learned in that episode, and maybe some of the previous ones, we do have blended families, or I guess step-parent situations. Mm-hmm. And we have Ty here who,
I keep trying. I keep trying. Maybe we'll get into that a little bit. Maybe not.
Maybe go ahead and read the question, and then we can kind of go from there.
A listener asks, I know you said you have stepchildren and blended families. What are the struggles you have, and how do you handle them?
Wow.
Where do we even begin?
Well, I think number one, it's just hard in general because there's no book. There's no book that you read that's like, this is exactly what you do, and this is going to have the best outcome.
Yeah, there's no foolproof plan at all.
I have one. Just kidding.
Oh boy.
As you learned from that episode.
Last week.
Buckle up.
And you can find it at work.
As we learned last week, I do not have that plan.
No,
I think the hardest thing is that there's so many variables when you blend a family, and personalities and ages and needs. There is not a one solution to everything, and that's the biggest problem.
And I don't think that, in our situations, we came into the situation early on in the kids' lives. I think, Brad, you're kind of the same way as that.
Yep.
I think it's more challenging when kids are in their teens. Mm-hmm. And does that make sense?
Yes.
That would be very challenging.
And not only for the kid themselves in their teens, but also now flip that same scenario around with the mom, but they aren't, or they haven't had that, and they don't understand what that is like.
Sure.
To no fault of their own, they just can't comprehend that.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, they can't relate.
Right. So. And so you can see where a lot of communication just like is an understanding is super important. But yeah.
Yes.
That.
Well, thanks for listening to this week's episode.
That'll wrap it
up. Justin, how old were the kids when you came into the picture?
Yeah, so when I met Curry, I think Asher was about 3 years old.
So she was
and
3.
Jamin would have been 10.
Okay.
Yeah. And just to clarify, Jamin was our special needs. He functioned at about a 3 to 4 year old level.
So he maintained 3 years old processing wise his whole life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So essentially both at the same age point, doing the same things when he came in.
Yeah.
And did you find it hard that that's such a young age? I feel like a lot of times our daughter was 2 when Brad came into the picture. And I feel like at that age, it's somewhat easier to bond. It's somewhat easier to establish kind of a relationship or whatever. But as they grow, sometimes that changes, or you have to grow with them into that next level. It's not just I came in when they were really young. So this is because as a parent, I kind of thought, I'm getting remarried. My daughter's 2. This is all she's ever going to know. And it is, but that doesn't mean that it does not come without challenges.
Absolutely. And whatever was happening between those years when she was 1 and 2 years old is also like she felt that as well as
Definitely.
a kid. Does that make sense?
Yep. Sure.
And she still is going to have that on, and she doesn't necessarily realize that's where it comes from.
Well, it's still a change.
Yeah.
Like even if kids can't voice that or say like this, you know,
Yep.
kids feel the shift and the changes in
100%.
their life for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest thing you have to realize too is like, not only is it a change for you as the parent and bringing someone else in, but what is this change going to do to the kid? And how does that affect them? And how do we keep them involved in the change and keep them a part of it? Or there is going to be a disconnect. If the kid isn't forefront and in it, there's a disconnect that's going to just continue to grow.
Yeah.
What challenges did you have, Justin?
I would say for me, at first, like I'm trying to think back because I feel like it's so hard to remember what it was
Yeah.
versus like what it is now. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
But I remember just like, you know, trying to understand the effect that it's going to have on the kids and understand like, I didn't understand kids. I never had kids. Does that make sense? And I wasn't with them that first part of their few years. So like, I didn't know what that effect was going to have some stranger come in to the home. And you hear about all these stories of like kids totally, they hate their step parent, if you will, you know, and they don't connect with them. And so like, there's that stigma or that like projection that I was already making onto that I feel like, that was challenging to kind of understand early on. And then I think for me, it was understanding what Curry was dealing with with his ex. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Like, so, at first it's that like there's no textbook for this. There's no like, and at this time, like, I wouldn't even have thought you could like to go to Google and Google about it, or does that make sense? So you're just trying to like figure it out along the way.
You're older than the internet. So,
but like knowing that he has an ex and they're kind of the decision makers.
yeah,
Does that make sense?
for sure. Was
And-
that
and-
difficult?
But I think that's where when we started dating, we were looking at it. We had a lot of conversations.
Tons.
We had a lot of conversations about what you were getting involved with, where a situation was, and what we wanted the outcome to be. And so, to your point, Whitney, is like, was the decision maker, was that all mine? And was he just there? That was one of the conversations we had right at the beginning, is there wasn't a distinguishing factor of, I'm the parent and you're just along for the ride.
Sure.
Is that he had to be at the table with a seat at the table in all the decisions. So as I was communicating with my ex and there was a decision to be made, it was always, this is great information. I will get back to you. So Justin and I could sit down and have this conversation of, this is what is happening and this is what our options are. How are we going to deal with it?
I love that.
And what are we going to confront? Because we had to be the same. We had to be the same.
Yeah.
And we put the kids at the very front of that every single time, of how does this affect the kids with what we're going to do or what decisions we're going to make? How does that affect the kid?
Wow.
And I think that was like our biggest struggle, is trying to navigate how we were coming together in the midst of raising these two kids at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like you make it sound so smooth, and I think early on we figured it out pretty quick, but absolutely it took conversation of like, wait,
Oh, yeah,
I don't have a say in that, or does that make sense? Like
Yeah.
but I
Well, 'cause
agree with you
sometimes
100%.
It is hard. I mean, Curry and I both came into the relationships with kids, and then we don't have stepchildren. You know,
Yeah,
we came
yeah.
we came to the table with kids. You guys didn't bring kids.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but you didn't bring kids. So
That you know of.
exactly, we're still expecting a knock on the door. But I mean, it's hard because I also don't fully understand sometimes where Brad's coming from, because these are my kids. The kids we have
Yeah.
are my kids. Do you
Yeah.
know? I'm
Yeah,
not
no,
saying that it's different, but it is kind of like I don't have that like, well, I don't have to share a decision. Do you know what I mean? Like I have to share a decision on one kid with not only Brad, but
Yeah.
with another parent, you know, so, but I don't have to do the like once removed thing like Brad does. Like it's not that he's removed, but do you know what I'm saying? Like when we talk about stuff, like obviously Brad and I are making decisions or talking together, but there's also someone else in that decision making process for our oldest child.
Yeah.
You know, but I'm not the one that's like once removed also with a child kind of.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I'm saying that correctly because it's not like you're a back seat or whatever, but.
So when there were decisions to be made with your oldest and your ex, would you guys have a conversation, you and Brad,
yes,
before the decision was finalized?
Yes, but we also, I think you had it much tougher with your ex and making some decisions, especially probably in the earlier years, where I feel like we've, even through what we've been through, and that will, a little bit we'll go through when our episode goes, but I feel like for the most part, my ex has been fairly easy to work with. In fact, I feel like most of the time he's just like, whatever
Kind of
you
allows
decide
you
is
to
going to
do.
be okay. Yeah. So
Yeah. The decision making between the three of us has never been an issue ever.
yeah. So
And
like
that's
we
awesome.
just, yes,
Like, 'cause
we've been
that's
very
not
lucky
super
for
common.
sure.
There's usually, it's almost like an ego thing between all three of them. I think that's more common.
Yeah, I think
Does that
so
make
too.
sense? Which is also more impactful on the kids
Right.
because they're usually used.
That's where
as
the
a-
harm comes.
a
the
weapon.
pawn.
Yeah.
And yep, for sure.
So
Sorry, go ahead, Ray.
So in my situation, I'll talk about my struggles and let me get it out. Because
You have your moment.
it may cause some outside of the podcast drama, but we'll go with it. So when I came into the picture, Whitney's mother, we won't name names.
Oh my goodness gracious.
Anyways, so Whitney was going through her marital issues at the time. And, anyways, your mother constantly watched Izzy while Whitney worked every day. She would watch Izzy. And then when everything started going on, your mom had stuff going on as well at home, some struggles at home. Anyways, her out for home and her like relief was Izzy. And she didn't really want to be at home, but if Izzy was there, everything was okay. And so her and Izzy created this relationship from a young age where they had each other. When I came into the picture, it was like having two mothers of this child.
Yeah, if you're talking about like where there's a clash in decision making,
Well,
we didn't
It
have
was
it with the
100.
ex.
Yeah.
It was more with my mom.
that's what I was just going to say.
Yeah.
What you experience
Yes.
with Whitney's mom
Is what you guys
is what
experience.
most people experience with the ex and the ex's family and
Yeah.
extended family.
Definitely.
Did you hang out with the ex like 5 to 6 times a week?
So, not that often,
we
but
did?
quite often.
Well,
like
we lived there for a little bit.
at all the kids' events and stuff.
And it-
I'm like, no,
And
we
it
didn't.
blew up a few times, like with parenting things, like, and so to last week's episode to this is some of the buildup of what the relationship started with. Is, from a young age, Izzy, like Whitney went to work earlier in the morning, and then I went to school later. And Izzy would come down, I'd take her to school. I'm like, you can't wear those shoes. They're open toed and you can't wear them. So she'd go upstairs, complain to grandma. Grandma would call Whitney and say, hey, Izzy wants to wear these shoes. Can she wear them? Whitney has no clue
I don't
what
know
the
what's going
context
on.
of the story is.
So I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, sure.
And then so she comes down and she says, no, she can wear them. I said, no, she can't. And so it became like this battle of who the actual parent was. And it was like this for probably until the last 5 years.
No, I would not say that at all.
From my perspective, what I perceive, it's 100% that way. Where you, like when we
She's
lived
not,
there,
but
it was
here's-
a problem. That's
but-
why I said, let me get it out, because it's,
Okay.
this is how I perceive it, and everybody probably should hear it. Is That's my perception. I was always in this uphill battle with how is Brad going to parent this from your mom.
I do see that, especially from the beginning, where grandma was used to playing a major role in her life, and you came in, and that there's a threat there, right? Because grandma's used to this role, and now we have another parent at home.
Yeah.
You know, so I definitely understand that. But the last 5 years, like,
Not the last 5 years.
He's saying he
Well, before
hasn't
that.
felt it. Oh,
before that though, like once that really started to come to a head, we moved out of my parents.
Once we moved back in with your parents is when it stopped, I would say.
But she didn't even. Okay.
Okay.
So
This will
my
be-
question would
everybody has
be,
their
well,
perception.
well,
my
and
question
this
would
is
be,
not even exclusive to blended families. Like,
Oh,
you
if
think
you're
of
right,
the
it's
crazy
not.
mother-in-laws
That's
who are constantly causing. I mean, not that like I saying your mom's crazy. I love your mom. I think your mom is amazing.
We get a
But what I'm saying is that like that is like people refer to their crazy mother-in-laws all the time because
Right.
of this is kind of
overbearing.
does that make sense? Like
For sure.
Too involved.
another challenge to the whole process. But sorry, Curry.
But my question would be, so if that was the issue and the reoccurring issue, what was your solution to that? How did you confront that? How did you deal with that between you and Whitney
you
and
build it up for a while and then you
Start a podcast so that we can tell them.
I mean,
No, the thing is, like,
it would build up and
there
then
were-
something would come out.
There were
and it would-
definitely
it would be
times like we
Yeah.
This is
had.
the end of the road.
It'd
We
boil
had
over.
Yeah.
so when Brad and I first got married, like when he came home from deployment, we lived with my parents. Brad went to school, I was working, and little things like this would happen. And then I feel like we try to have a conversation about like, Brad is a parent here. You need to let him parent. You're not allowing him. You're undermining him. You know, like
Yeah.
there was a few times where things happened and we would have the conversation. It didn't change. And so ultimately that was why we decided to move out.
Like I would show up to pick up Izzy from school and she's not there.
She'd
Where
been
the-
picked up.
Where the hell is she?
Yeah.
Oh, well, grandma picked her up. Like things like that. And it was,
Yeah.
and it started being where grandma would coordinate her care more than us.
And to get even, Brad
With the
reported her
ex.
kidnapped.
There was a lot of like coordinating stuff with the ex where like even I was cut out of that, you know,
Yeah.
where like my ex would, instead of calling me and saying like, hey, I've got to leave earlier because he's a pilot. So he'd say like, hey, I need to leave earlier. I need to catch this flight. Or instead of calling me and saying, can you take Izzy like a day earlier? Can I drop her off at night? He would just call my mom,
Yeah.
you know? So I felt like I was being cut out of even
Oh, wow.
decisions
Sure.
Yeah,
like
but I
that.
think-
So
I think some of the failure was when, let's take an easy example here of like, hey, it's 9:30 at night. You can't have a bunch of sugar.
see, and I don't remember any of this.
And
so.
it would be like,
No.
I want to give it to you as grandma, but Daddy Brad does not want you to have it.
My mom is really good at playing that.
Putting
card.
you making you the bad cop
Bad
every
guy
time.
on everything. So in any no situation turned into a no because Brad said so.
Yeah.
And so from a young
That'd be
age,
hard.
from a young age of 2 years old on till 5 years ago, that's how it was. And that's how mine and Izzy's relationship kind of started and built.
so if that changed 5 years ago, what have you done to help repair some of that?
Absolutely nothing, Curry.
Oh, okay. but knowing
I mean-
like what? So how do you do that? Like how do you repair relationships now in the last 5 years where
trying to
grandma's
figure
not
that
as
out.
involved? Okay,
Trying to figure that
that's fair.
That just made me think about in the last episode, or in number 8, you had talked about how you felt like you were comparing your like what you were doing in your childhood at a certain age. It made me think about like no cases are all the same because you grew up with your parents, your mom and your dad. And whatever relationship you built from 0 to 3 and on was from those same parents. Now you have a child who is grown up a few years without you, and then with a few years having this go on, the same approach won't work. Does that make sense? Because your upbringing and what you experienced and how you connected with your parents is much different than Izzy's connection with you. Does that make sense?
I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
I may be tipsy, but no, it does not.
Oh, okay.
No, it definitely makes sense. Like, and I think we've had that conversation too, where of course you love her unconditionally, but from a child's point of view, I think it's different. I think you know that your parents love you unconditionally. However, she's not biologically yours. So even in her mind, and I think in a lot of kids who have a step parent mind, it's like, okay, well, sure, they love me, but if I screw up, are they still going to love me? Because they don't have to love me like my parents do.
But there's also,
And while there's no, like, I don't agree that I feel that way or that Brad feels that way.
No, you don't. I'm just saying in a
100%
kid's
from
mind,
a child's
I feel like
perspective,
that's what the thought
easier
is.
for them to think that.
Yeah.
When that goes back to a conversation Justin and I had not too long ago about labels and labeling step parent versus just parent, or allowing the kid to come to a conclusion or a label themselves. In your guys' relationship, has step parent been the word you use?
Never.
It's Brad.
And why not?
We just never did.
You just never
from day
used that
one, it was
word. Okay.
never dad, like Brad's your stepdad. It was never
Yeah.
It was never
It was just
a
Brad.
word that was used. Yeah.
Because that's kind of the conversation that we had, is that we've never used the word stepdad or step parent or that, because to us it felt like there was a distinguishing factor of
I'm your
you're
dad
separate.
and he's
Yeah,
your
you're different,
stepdad.
or
separate,
Yes.
you're different,
there's like,
or
yeah.
with the two younger girls now is like, those are different. Now it's dad and you're a
Right.
step, and there's something different or wrong about this.
Okay, a thought just came to me. And sometimes I feel like, and it's never been confirmed, but sometimes I feel like maybe another battle that we were fighting, especially when Izzy was young, is maybe some comments and things that were being made by the ex's family. And maybe it was just like little things or because we would have Izzy come home and say things like, I mean, she only pulled the, like, you're not my dad, maybe once or twice, when she was young, like, but you could tell that, like, by the way that certain things were being phrased or something, that you're like, okay,
There's another
you're
influence.
hearing
You're
this
hearing
from
it
somewhere,
somewhere.
which is also a battle, right?
Sure.
Like, you're going to dad's house and now you're hearing from other people that,
Which I don't think it was ever from dad.
I don't think it was ever from
always
dad either.
from
so
family.
I just feel like there's things sometimes that
like
were
she's being coached.
said.
That Brad's
Yeah.
not your
Well,
dad.
I don't even
and-
think that they were directly talking to her. I think
just
it's
pick it up.
conversations that were happening.
Oh yeah, and
That
kids
she's
are
picking up on.
very observant about that
Yes.
stuff. So that makes sense.
When I think they're going to be a little sensitive to it too, is like, they're talking about a situation that I'm involved in. They're going to pick up on what's being said, even though it's not direct.
Definitely.
That's for
Do you
sure.
ever feel like you were battling that, Justin?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But you battled that with my own family.
Yeah. And that's where I was saying, like, I battled that anytime Asher went to hang out with his family. I felt like there was things, and it wasn't necessarily directed at me directly. It was our relationship.
Like, does your dad still have that roommate?
Yeah.
You know, I want to jump in here on this because I had a slightly different situation with Fiona one day. She came over to me and she just offered up. I wasn't coaching, wasn't asking. I just out of nowhere, she just said, I don't like him, referring to my ex-wife's now husband, her stepdad. And things weren't great at the time between me and the ex. And I really had to just like put all of that aside and dig into the problem. Like, is there something going on or whatever? Mm-hmm. So I just said, Fiona, is it like, why don't you like him? You know, and as we had this little conversation really quick, I realized that it wasn't him. It was It was the fact that he wasn't me.
Yeah.
And there was
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
new guy in her house, you know, and she was struggling with that entire situation. So I just had to swallow my pride and get all the feelings out and say, okay, you know what? Give him a chance. He loves you. He wants to do all the great things, and he's your mom's husband. So just give him a chance. You know, don't form any opinions. Just he's a good guy. You know, and that was really hard at the time to do, but
Well, I love that, Ty, because I think that when you put the kids at the forefront, that is exactly the response you give. And that in your situation, when there's the 3 people involved or 4 people involved, like it takes all 4 of them to be an adult, to really make this potentially work, because it's hard. Like when I say potentially, like we're doing our best, and just to make it work a little bit, it takes adults being mature and talking through that and really thinking about the kids, just like that response.
When I think that's where the kids come first.
Totally.
As you look at the kids and you meet them where they are, their world was rocked just as much as ours was in the divorce, for sure,
Definitely.
and all that. And you have to step out of it. Like you said, Ty, you step out of it in your own mindset. So you have your own ideas and your thoughts, and you very easily can lead them to where you want them to
run
lead.
wild with that, right? And get angry and send
and
texts.
sure, he's a horrible person
More
or all
texts,
these
anyway.
or say these things, but
Right.
you have to be the adult and step down to the kids' level and see that their world was rocked, and you have to help them process.
Yeah, and I had to verify with her that there wasn't something that happened,
Absolutely.
right? Like I think even he would agree that that needs to happen. But then once I realized that this was just kind of
Emotion.
her struggling
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
that situation, it made it easier to just say, hey, you know what? Give him a chance.
Yeah. I like that.
Ty, what was hard? Was it hard for you to watch your kids have a stepdad? Have someone come into their life that was playing that role at
Great
another
question.
house?
Yeah, but I mean, personally, right? It was
Yeah.
like, okay, I had an experience before the divorce where basically, you know, had one of those awesome dreams that people have where somebody else was involved, you know? And so all of a sudden it was like all of these.
Wait, what?
Is this a sex dream?
No, it was like,
What kind of involvement?
it's like I had a dream that we were divorced and that she was married to somebody else, you know? And
Not that kind of dream. Wait.
so, yeah.
Not the
So
good type.
having that kind of come to reality, and you know, I struggled with some of that, right? As far as interacting with the kids, though, like in that regard, the only thing I really ran into was Fiona, and I kind of expected that, only because she struggles with that change.
Yeah.
You know, she's very close to her mom.
Yeah.
And so somebody else coming in and taking some of that time away from her,
From her and her mom.
potentially, right? This is all perception.
Which
It didn't-
valid,
it
you know,
didn't-
valid on her end too.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
A
Yeah.
change of what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what was actually really cool about it was Ivy she was older, and she was older than all of his kids. So she was just already kind of moving into her own and doing her own thing. She was working, looking at going to school, you know, graduating from high school, all of that stuff. So she was just kind of doing her thing. Lennox got the brother that he always wanted. So he's got a stepbrother that's his age, and they're very close. They have very similar interests.
Yeah.
You know, so that actually worked out super good for him, you know?
Right.
So, they've done a wonderful job of it, of blending the family and, you know, doing their thing. It has, however, set the bar pretty high for me. So when I am dating somebody and there's a potential blending of families,
They have that expectation over there. for
Well,
that to be
No,
here.
he has the
No, I
expectation
do
for that to be a
that my
simulated
kids
here.
that I marry somebody that has best friends ready for my kids over
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
I know that's not realistic
That
at
is
all.
absolutely not realistic.
But to them it is because they have that on the other side, and so I could see where they might expect that here too.
But they've never voiced that. That
Right,
is all
right,
me.
right.
That is
It's just their-
completely on
yeah.
me.
They're a little older
Now,
too,
yes. Now the youngest is 14 and she's extremely busy with
Yeah.
her life. So I don't really,
Yeah.
Lennox comes over half the week and still does his own thing no matter what's going on here anyway. So it's becoming less and less an issue,
Yeah.
but it does also put me kind of in a position where, how, and this is probably a different episode, but do I want to entertain a younger set of kids
Yeah.
again, because I think that's where the struggles, and I have dated somebody, lived with somebody that had younger kids. And, so the thing I was going to comment on, with your situation, Brad, is there does become this perceived power dynamic, real dad versus stepdad versus whatever,
Yeah.
and what can they, what influence do they have? What punishment, what discipline can they issue versus real dad or, and stepmom versus, whatever the dynamic is. That can be tricky, especially when you kind of discuss house rules, but then you're asked to enforce those and you don't necessarily feel like, as the quote unquote stepdad, you should be
Yes.
enforcing.
Well-
Totally. This is huge.
Well,
This is
it
huge.
is
This
too,
is a
because I
challenge
think-
for a lot of people.
I think age plays a big role in that, where Justin and Brad came into the relationships and
Totally.
the kids were young. I feel like you have a little bit, you have a
You have
bigger
more
seat at
time.
the table.
Yes, you have more
100%.
time
To come in,
do that.
to do discipline, to build that relationship. If you're coming into a relationship where the kids are older, I might say you need to take a little bit of a step back. Mom needs to be the enforcer of the
Yeah.
rules, and you need to have mom's back
Oh, yeah.
until
Sure.
a more relationship is established.
Yeah.
But then you need to be working during that time to establish the relationship. So
Absolutely.
eventually you can assist.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it shouldn't fall on mom forever. She
Right.
can't be the only one, but at
And
the
she's
beginning
not always
of
going
that,
to be
it has
around.
to
Yeah.
be, it
and
has
there's
to
all
be.
that stuff.
Yeah.
But I would ask Ty the question of,
Sure.
with your last relationship, were you able to do both roles, the enforcer or just building the relationship?
Oh, I was so shitty at both. I feel like I really just
That's
struggled
all right.
with it. We were coming at it from a place of only having them for a temporary stretch of time. So we did try our best to do different activities and whatnot. But the way they interacted with parents and authority was not anything that I was used to.
Yeah.
So I really
you're taking on a new
struggled.
culture.
Yeah, I really struggled with the fact that it didn't matter how many times I asked or even offered to assist to do something, like it wouldn't get done, or so Lennox lives in the basement, right? And there's a television down there, and they would want to watch television, which is great, and they would go down there. And I asked. We set our house rule. If Lennox is home, we just don't go downstairs while he's there because he's
His
usually
space.
sleeping. Yeah, that's we're just giving Lennox his area. And this sounds like my kids are perfect. They're definitely not perfect. But I went down there several times and was like, "Hey guys, Lennox is here. Get your asses upstairs
come on."
right now." And I was like, why am I always having to do this? Like, why? There is a TV on this floor. Why are they going down there for that? And it was hard for me to try to reason with that because I just kind of got, oh, this is Ty. And we're buddies and we're playful and we just kind of joke about everything.
Yeah.
You know, and it's kind of like,
Mm-hmm.
well, I need some time where I am in a parental role with you guys and you listen to whatever the fuck I'm saying right now because you're driving me nuts.
I
You
think
know?
that's honestly, I think
The
that
balance
is
is hard.
super hard. I think that is super hard at that age. Like, I empathize with you because I don't know what that's like. Like you said, like we started so young, so I feel like we kind of
We started young, but
created
I'm still
them.
living in that 13 years later. That
Yeah,
same
I
situation.
do feel like I came into the situation a little naive. I mean, I thought we would have struggles at first, and I thought like, okay, this is an adjustment period.
Yeah.
But I thought like, we'll work through it. We'll build this relationship. Everything will be fine. And now here we are
Still
running
with
into
it.
stuff.
dealing with issues,
Yeah.
So
Because I'm not good at either disciplining. I want to be a good discipliner.
oh no, you're great at disciplining. It's the other part.
No. I think our definitions of disciplining are different.
No, I think
That's like I
we've
want to get a
entered.
belt out, but
I want to say, hey, screen time is not going to happen tomorrow because you did this. Our kids know damn well that they're going to get.
It won't get enforced.
That I think that's
there's no
a dynamic
enforcement.
I'm
too.
guilty of that.
There's no
like, for
enforcement
sure.
whatsoever.
Well, I think there's a dynamic too of we've gotten ourselves. I mean, really, it ultimately comes back
It's not on
to
the
the
kid's
two
part.
parents, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Well, it's
it
not
comes
on the
back
kid's
where
part.
I feel like we've gotten into a power struggle now because I feel like I am a very relaxed parent and I do a lot of things for my kids that I shouldn't. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
That
I'm
they're
not
capable
helping
of
them.
doing.
Yes.
Right,
I'm not
right.
helping them become that full functioning adult because I'm just like, let me do it. I'll do it.
Sure.
Where Brad is more like the kids need to learn, you know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
becoming now where like it's become a power struggle.
So-
He's over disciplining them because he knows I'm not going to do it. And I'm overcompensating for that because I know he's going to over discipline. Do you know what I mean? Like,
totally
so
understood.
we're now in a power struggle of, and the kids know that.
And the kids are wrapped up in between. Of
So
seeing
they're
who
like,
can
oh,
play
well,
what.
okay, he's going to get mad, so I'm going to go to mom. He's like, or you know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
become where the kids know that. And so now it's back to us trying to figure out how to get on the same page
Yeah.
and go back to figuring
and do you know
that
what I
out.
love about this? This is not exclusive
To blended
blended
families.
families.
No, it's not.
This
It's not.
is what I
This is
guarantee
parenting.
everybody
This is parenting.
struggles with at some point or another on some level. Like I love that you just are honest about it because this is the realness of being in a marriage and trying to come to terms and figure out what works and agree and try to raise
and nobody
good
talks about
humans.
it.
And nobody talks
We
about
didn't
it.
talk about it until our last podcast, and that was a bad couple weeks.
We
But
had
it's
2
not
weeks
bad.
of a fight at home.
No. It was bad. I'm not saying it's going to end bad. I'm just saying
Oh, you're saying the
It
what?
was bad.
You're
The
saying
podcast
the
caused-
podcast wasn't bad. It was your. It was what
The
happened.
aftermath.
It was the
aftermath.
aftermath of that, and that came
Well, I'm
from
saying-
also
I'm
some
saying that-
history
I'm
The
saying like
podcast
last week
triggered
and a-
it.
The last week and a half were bad
at
at
home.
home.
Yeah,
because of the
But
podcast.
because
Well,
it
not
creates
necessarily just because
a
of the
conversation
podcast, but it,
and
it
a
brought
conflict
up.
It opened up.
It did. It opened up, and I think it opened up something that we've been struggling with for a while, and have kind of both kicked under the rug of
Yeah,
like
of not
we know we're
wanting to deal
struggling
with
with
it.
this. I don't know how. Like even now, sitting here, I can tell you we don't know how to exactly move forward with some of the things that we're struggling with. Like we're trying to figure that out still. Like we've had many conversations the last 2 weeks of we know this is a problem.
What do
And
we do?
I know what your hurt is. You know what my hurt is now in this situation. How do we move forward to make this
Yeah.
a harmonious home? Like,
Yeah.
how do we make this a good home environment for everybody?
and
So-
meet everybody's needs.
Yes.
There
That
has-
everybody
there
has
And we
needs
have
and-
not figured that out yet.
There
We're
has
still
to be-
working on
There
that.
has to be a
And I
middle
think
ground, and we
that's-
just haven't really talked about it
Yeah, but I think
Until-
that's
But
the
you're starting.
communication.
That's
until
the-
Sunday.
Yeah, now it's. I mean, the beginning is the awareness on it, right? It's tricky
Definitely.
because these days, dad or dad can make rules about or can discipline with Brad. To your point, screen time. Like there is no screen time tomorrow. But spouse is like, why am I getting punished?
Yeah.
That means I have to turn around and entertain them because they're not going to be
Amen.
on a screen.
Amen.
You
I'm
know
the one
what I
that's going to have
mean?
to deal with the crying fit when they're out of
Yeah.
school because
Amen.
they can't
Or
watch
I'm
the
left to
show, or they
enforce
can't-
it and
yeah.
stuff. It's tricky.
And
It's-
on the same note, on a Friday, and like that's my only day. Saturday, Sunday. Like if we ground the kids, like does that make sense?
Then we're
like,
grounding
then we're
ourselves.
grounding ourselves too, because that's
To
my
be
only
there.
2 days to kind of hang out with them and go do fun things
That's
at the same
true.
time. So
That's true.
it is a challenge for sure.
But I think
For
going
sure.
back to your comment, Brad and Whitney, of like the conversation happens, it comes up, and you try and figure out how to move forward, how to create
Yeah.
this balance of needs and everything. I think that's the biggest struggle that we have in marriage in general, of how do you come to terms with each other's needs, and how do we create a space where everybody can thrive?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and bringing kids into the dynamic, step kids, blended families, our own kids, just adds another layer to that.
It does.
There's more than two people involved.
Right.
Yes, because I would say Brad and I have always been pretty good at communicating on almost everything. And we hardly ever fight. Our biggest fights have always been about how we parent the kids. That has always been the biggest source of contention in our marriage. And I think for the last few years, we've just kind of like brushed little things off here or there. And we're like, yeah, he parents differently, I parent differently. But like in the end, we're okay. And I think it's just now starting to be like, yeah, we actually need to figure this shit out.
Well, yeah, because some of it comes down to, with just in generality of the topic, is with blended families, it's you're treating my child different than your child or our children.
Yeah,
I think that's a huge
Yeah.
thing.
No,
but I guess
I
that's my
agree with
question.
that.
Do you feel like you set different standards for one versus the other?
Yes, but not based on what is biologically my child.
Yeah,
It's
ours are-
age-based, I would say. But I think it's sometimes
that, Brad.
perceived. I think it's perceived as like, well, he's an asshole to me because he told me to do this chore. I'm like, well, yeah, there's 7-year difference. Like,
Yeah, but I guess rewind. How old is he? Or 7 years?
14.
14.
So
14
rewind
and
7 years, and do you feel like you treated her the same when she was 7 as what you're treating your 7-year-old? Your expectations for her then, is it the same as your expectations for your current 7-year-old?
In a way, probably lower.
I do think I think he is fighting that dynamic. And I think there was a little bit of a shift once Scotty was born, because not that Brad was good with Izzy and stuff when she was little. Are you guys playing footsie?
They're totally putting footsie under the table. Oh my God.
All
This table got really like soft at the bottom.
Something's moving up my leg.
It wouldn't have been soft.
That's hilarious.
I'm sorry about that.
Your toes are cold.
I'm turning bright red right now because I'm like, what is moving up my leg?
Oh wow,
I'm just like, man,
that's
this
even more intense.
table feels different on that side.
Okay, well,
No, I just feel like because there was actually such a big age gap, there was more expectations on Izzy when we had a little tiny Scotty. Does that make sense? So Scotty's little tiny, she's cute. Both Brad and I are just like, oh, what a cute little baby. Izzy, you need to clean your room. Izzy, you need, do you know what I mean? So it's like,
Yes.
oh, well, you guys are so fun with her.
Yeah.
And now that Scotty's getting older, Izzy definitely sees that Scotty gets into trouble all the time. And, you know, she's expected to keep her room clean. I think now that Scotty's getting older, some of those things are actually getting better for Izzy, because now she can see like, oh, okay, maybe I wasn't as picked on. Like,
Yeah.
there are things
There
expected
isn't
of her. Yeah, it is.
Age difference.
It is just kind of an age difference thing.
Got
But
it.
I think it's also maybe hard where maybe the bond is just a little different with.
Yeah, the bond's never been great, but I think like.
But that's not
like,
necessarily
let's-
just to reiterate. That's not necessarily you feel like because she's not your biological. It's just the circumstances early on in your relationship that you feel like caused that.
right.
Okay.
And there, I mean, have been great things. Like I have pictures of them playing when she was little and like all kinds of, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, of course.
there's been some great times. So it's not like everything's always been bad.
gloom
I feel like we're also a little bit in like the teenage years where everything is a little bit.
yeah.
You know, because it was like a year ago we tried to do like a chore chart, and the youngest had like 2 chores on hers, and the other one had like 4 or 5, and there weren't big things, but it was like, why the heck does she have 2?
It's the
Like,
age appropriateness, right? That's,
why do
that's
you
a tough
hate me
thing to
so
explain.
much type attitude? It's like, what the world? Like,
Yeah.
one of these is brushing your teeth. Like, it's not that big of a
But did
deal.
you say it to
Yeah.
her like that? Because I could see where she would.
It definitely
But
has
you know
a
what
lot
the
to
problem-
do with
but I
like
do think
delivering the
that-
message too.
I
for
do
sure.
think it's how we, like
tone.
something that I've had to work on for myself is
your sarcasm to the kids?
yes, but I speak to my kids as if I'm speaking to another adult. I expect them to like see it the way that I do.
Oh, right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So my commenting or my sarcasm to them is almost like I expect them to understand it, which they can't. Their brain is not at that level that they can understand in the same way that we do.
For sure. I think
They
Brad
just-
does the same
they-
thing. Like he uses a lot of sarcasm and that
Which
does
come-
not compute
Yes.
to the kids,
To a young
especially
age.
because I remember Izzy always saying like, he's always saying things that are so mean to me. And I'm like, honey, he's not being mean. He's just being sarcastic and it does not compute. So then he's just an asshole. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
No, and from Izzy's perspective, I could totally see that from her little brain. Like
When she's 26,
but
I love it.
But from Brad, like, but knowing Brad, I know that he
got 12
like.
more
Does that make
years.
sense? Like,
Yes.
it's seeing them in their level at their level, and
Sorry.
I guess a simple like if like, hey, I know that you feel this way. Like, validate their feelings because like I would feel like looking up there, like, oh, that's more like, and then help them understand why. But I think the validation first of like, yeah, I can see why you're frustrated. That would be frustrating if you looked up and saw that somebody else had a bunch of chores. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
and then helping her understand maybe, but you are 7 years older and you use the house this much more.
As a
And
team, we try that. It just doesn't sink in ever.
yeah.
So
let me ask you this: with what you're going through, have you ever considered going and getting like therapy or going and seeing a therapist?
Family counselor.
witch doctors, is that the same thing? Or
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
No, that is definitely like,
We
that's-
have our answer.
especially lately has been a big, like maybe we need a third party person to try, someone neutral in this because
Yeah,
I
to
feel
help
like
navigate.
a lot of times I'm in the middle of Izzy and Brad. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah. The mediator.
trying to explain to Izzy of like, he's not picking on you.
This is where
100%.
he's
You're-
coming
yeah,
from.
this is where you're coming.
you're
But
coming
I feel like I
from.
can only do so much of that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then it also
Yeah.
makes me, in some ways, not be as good of a partner or on Brad's sides in certain things because I'm like, well, she already feels like she's picked on. So stop. Like,
Yeah.
Well, and that
don't say that.
compromises
Don't do
your
that.
position
Or
between
it
both
does.
of them.
It does. And it, and it's
like
hard to be
Whitney's-
that person. So lately we have been talking about like, I think we need a neutral third party to like at
Izzy's
least try to get us
chore-
all back on the
mediate.
same page.
Yeah.
Izzy's chore is to empty the dishwasher.
Oh,
But
we
Whitney-
heard about the dishwasher last week.
Yeah, Whitney would rather empty it than deal with
You say that, but
Bradley
I
coming
haven't.
home.
I haven't emptied the dishwasher in a long time, unless Izzy's with her dad. She always empties the dishwasher, and she's been really good about it. Like if I ask her to do it, she comes down and she does it.
So rewind 2 months ago, and it was an issue, but now it's not.
Now you know why the little comments.
Oh, I know, Brad.
Has to have the last word.
No, but again, like this is the realness of it all. Like this is, and there's no
right solution to everything.
I think it's amazing. Like I have some friends. He had 5 kids. She had 5 kids. And mixing that many kids, you can only imagine how many personalities and different things
That
that
is
come
great.
into
Yeah,
play.
absolutely.
Right? So I think that is super admirable. I just hope, like every time, every experience that I have where there's a potential blending or something like that, I learn a little bit more and try and take a better approach to that. And I'll be honest, Justin, like I on one occasion, it never kind of progressed to that point, but I was dating somebody with a special needs child, and I was going to reach out to you for some perspective because of your experience with Jamin, you know, and going into that, and what was going through your mind, any doubts or anything like that you might have had at that point, integrating that, because that is a huge responsibility to take on. And I remember in my marriage, my ex-wife's youngest sister had Down syndrome, and there was this potential that we would be her caretaker at some point because she and her sister were so close, you know, and I was at times deathly afraid of that situation just because I didn't know how I would interact. So
unknown.
Yeah, fear. That's exactly, Brad. Fear of the unknown. I was scared of what I didn't know. So I was going to reach out to you to ask you about that. And I guess it just resolved itself. But I still think it's extremely admirable that you would jump wholeheartedly into that situation, you know.
Thank you. And for those of you that are listening, and we didn't actually talk about it on our introduction episode, but our oldest was special needs, and he actually passed away 2 years ago. So when we refer to him in the past tense, that's essentially why. Yep. But on that note, when you fall in love with that boy, it was easy. Like, you just do it. You just, like, he truly stole my heart.
I love that.
Well, I think that's where
sense.
I think you really excelled at meeting him where he was. And it made the blending of bringing Justin in, because in his dark days and when Jamin was struggling with different things, you would show up. You would be there for him in his moments, and that's what he needed in his moments of chaos, and meeting him where he was. And I think that's the biggest thing that I would say we've tried to put forefront in bringing our family together is meeting the kids where they are in their moments, in their chaos, in their brains, in their levels of comprehension. How do we meet them where they're at and let them know that we're there? We're not there to be the parent. We're there to be the stability.
And in that you are the parent.
And in that you are the parent.
Yeah, ultimately, that's the role, right? To buoy them up.
But again, every situation is different. I think that did have a huge impact, is having Jamin's needs as they were. And then allowing, like with Asher, I mean, she's a golden child. Like, she really is like a golden child. And she was also impacted by Jamin. And does that make sense? So like, that could have been one of the factors that I feel like we're an anomaly for the situation that we have with our kids. We were actually just talking to our 17-year-old about this. We were like, what do you feel like? Like, what do you feel like worked with this? You know, because we often have conversations with her of like, do your friends hang out with their parents like you do? Like, 'cause she'll just be like, I don't want to go out. I just want to stay home and hang out with you guys. And I'm like, I would have never done that. Like, I would have never wanted to just hang out with my parents at 17 years old.
Tell your friends you're busy so you can hang out with your dads. Like,
yeah.
Well, I want to comment on Asher being the golden child, 'cause she really is. And one of my favorite conversations that I ever had with you guys about her was when she started to transition and her intellect was older than Jamin's. And she started kind of filling in the big sister role. Yeah, and outpacing him and stuff like that. And just how she took that on and loved him and really stepped up. And
she totally did.
Okay, because my favorite Asher thing is when she says something that's semi mean to the younger ones. And then I'm like, oh, she is a normal older sister. And it makes me feel so good about my kids.
Semi-mean with Justin's like personality twisted into it. And you're
Because
like,
she's so good all the time. So every once in a blue moon when she like gets a little
Has had
upset
enough.
with the younger ones,
She
and I'm
allows
like,
the-
oh
the
good. She
shadow
is
side.
actually a regular teenage older
yeah.
sister.
So true.
Okay,
So true.
I found this article and it talks about how the odds are really stacked against people in blended families. And it says the divorce rate in second marriages when only one partner has children is over 65%. When both partners have children, the rate rises to 70%.
Wow.
And the divorce rate for third marriages is 73%.
Wow.
Wow.
Well, and on that note, we were reading an article last night that and less than 30%
Yeah.
look for outside help.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Of those second marriages, blended families, less than 30% look for outside help by either reading a book, Googling, or counseling. And I thought that is fascinating
Yeah, for sure.
to see that
It is, but
it is
I
stacked
can
against.
also like understand a little bit because like we were talking about, we've never gone to a counselor, even though we've had obviously these issues the entire marriage. But I feel like they
But
don't
you have
always.
friends like us, so
So what's a
You have
counselor
a
for?
podcast.
Why
We
would do
can
that?
fix you.
I've heard that somewhere.
Who needs a counselor?
But I feel like it's not all the time. Like we're not dealing with issues
Right,
all
right,
the time.
right.
We have periods where everything seems really great and everyone's
Yeah.
getting along fine, and then all of a sudden where things fall apart and it feels like everything is going wrong, and then okay, we've got to figure this out, and then things start getting on the right track. And you know what, I understand why people don't reach out or try to read a book or hire a counselor or do whatever, because it's like
roller
it goes in
coaster.
waves. Yeah.
But to Brad's point earlier too, it's not talked about.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's one thing if we need medical advice, we ask around for referrals of somebody who, because we know everybody needs medical advice. That's a normal thing. Does that make sense?
Yep.
I think like with therapy, it's almost like there's this negative connotation that like if you
Still.
came to us and say, hey, like we really need a therapist to help us with this, there's almost this sense of like shame
Secretive
or
shame.
guilt that, we
Absolutely.
Failed.
yeah. Yes. A failure, and that people are going to judge us for that, or that we're less than because we didn't have that. Like, when in all reality, like, look at the stats. Like, everybody is dealing with this in one way or another. And this is only about blended families. Like, you think about what you're going through right now, it has no significance to blended families. Does it add to it? Yes. But it's just,
But this
marriage.
is families in general.
Right.
It's true.
Like, and it's the dynamic that changes when they're 3 to when they're 13,
Yep.
when 17 and 25. Like
so
the
true.
dynamic changes, and your relationship and how to parent them changes that whole process.
And each one of them is an individual.
Absolutely.
You've got to approach it all over again.
And totally different.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I'm going to say things to the 8-year-old different than I'm going to say them to the 3-year-old.
Well, and the 8-year-old and the 17-year-old, like,
Right.
It's just, yeah. But I mean, luckily for us, like the therapy, we do therapy every week, and it's actually really inexpensive. The best part, and I think it's why our relationship works so well, is because I am Curry's therapist.
Oh my gosh. I thought you were going to say a bottle of champagne, but okay.
Yes, I drink the champagne and he provides therapy. It's perfect. I was wondering where you were going with that.
I know Curry's look when you're like, we go to therapy every week. He's like,
We do.
Just
This is when
tell
I'm,
me about your mother.
Here's a bottle.
here's a bottle, start talking, and I will go to sleep. Sometimes I talk to the dog.
Oh wow!
Oh.
yeah.
Well,
I
on
don't
that
know.
note.
It's,
Have we answered the question?
I don't know. I mean,
Is there an
obviously,
answer to the question?
blending is really hard, even when you're doing it at a young age. Like, I thought we would run into some issues and then be okay. Like,
Yeah.
it's a continued thing, like any relationship, really.
Yeah.
You've got to continue to build that foundation or it crumbles, you know? So I think everybody deals with issues in trying to come together and blend a family.
Keeping a marriage is one fight, right? And then blending a family is another fight. And these are active things. These are not passively just going to fix themselves. So I feel like you have to be up for it. You have to engage in it and tackle it head on.
Yeah.
At the same time, so like I liked your comment, Brad. I don't think there is an answer for this.
There's not one answer.
No,
I don't think there's one
I
answer.
think it's situational dependent and
Well, and I
personal,
think the biggest
preference
thing
on how to
is
deal with it.
you're having to fight for your relationship with your spouse.
Yeah.
You're having to fight for the relationship with the kids. And as long as you're fighting for both, I think there's progress.
And
And the
sometimes
communication of what you're fighting for.
I agree with that. And sometimes just hearing that somebody else is struggling with the same thing you are, that helps too.
100%, because we don't see that on social media.
No, we do.
We
not.
only
No, we
see
don't.
the perfect. We only see that everybody looks better than us at what they're
And
doing.
has the perfect marriage and kids.
Look at
and
us.
life.
We just went to Disney World. It was so great.
I wish for you on your birthday the life you live on Facebook.
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, awesome. I think that answer it does not answer. It answers in its
Yeah,
own
there's
little
no
way.
answer.
of
But
like-
this is what we're dealing
Yeah,
with.
this is the realness
This is-
of
we're in the fight.
behind it, and we are working on that every day of our lives and trying our best, just like probably everyone else.
Look, if we find
all
a
you can
solution,
do.
we'll let you guys know.
Yeah,
Write a book.
We'll
Write a book.
post it. We'll have a whole series. True blending stories. It's like true crime stories podcast, but true blending.
true blending.
Oh my God.
All right. Well, should we wrap it?
It's a wrap.
Until next week.
Thanks, everybody. That's going to wrap it up for this episode. Don't forget, you can find us online at tipsyneighbors.com, at the Tipsy Neighbors on Instagram, and on X, formerly Twitter, at Tipsy Neighbors. We hope to hear from you soon.